Welcome back to Coastal Characters. I'm your host, Nicholas Barcelo, and today we're joined by Dan Wolf, founder of Cape Air and former Massachusetts state senator. Through Cape Air, Dan helped build one of the country's largest independent regional airlines while connecting communities across Cape Cod, the Northeast, and the Caribbean. Dan, it's great to have you with us.
It is great to be here, Nick. Thanks.
Please give me a little introduction about yourself.
I grew up as a youngster in the city of Philadelphia. My mom was a history teacher. Dad was a business person. And we always summered on Cape Cod. And like so many people listening, I'm sure, ended up relocating here after I went to college just because it's such a beautiful and a wonderful community, both environmentally and the people that are here. I studied political science at Wesleyan University in Connecticut. That was my secondary degree. And here I am. Always a passion for flying. So I learned to fly at the Chatham Airport almost 50 years ago. So I've had a vantage point of looking at the Cape from the air for almost 50 years. And one thing led to another. Went to mechanic school for a couple of years after I learned how to fly. So as a pilot and a mechanic, had the ability to start Cape Air in 1988. And over the years, it grew very organically.
Oh, that's great to hear. So we have one question. Very nice tradition here for Coastal Characters. Tell me, what is your go-to ice cream flavor?
Oh my gosh, it's got to be caramel. It's got to be one of the caramel flavors.
Caramel,
like caramel swirl. Yeah.
Okay,
caramel swirl.
That's a good choice. Personally, I just go basic vanilla.
But do you put anything on it?
No, just vanilla. Yeah, I make ice cream at Candy Corner, so I feel like I have at least a good opinion, you know.
Well, what a great place that is to get ice cream too,
right?
For sure.
Okay. Cape Air started here on Cape Cod. What was the moment when you realized the airline could actually work and grow beyond just a small regional idea?
So I think, like so many small businesses that become bigger businesses, you really don't start with the idea of we're going to grow this into a big thing. There was a need. Provincetown was served by air to Boston since 1949. And in the early 1980s, the airline industry was going through a lot of reorganization and adjustment to deregulation. So the airline industry had been highly regulated up until 1978. Under the Carter administration, the airlines were deregulated. And there were a lot of shock waves after that. So in the early 1980s, when I was learning to fly and building flight time and really becoming well-versed in aviation, the airline industry itself was going through, again, a lot of shock waves. One of those was that the carrier serving between Provincetown and Boston went out of business. And then another carrier started up, and they couldn't actually serve the market. So I was on Cape Cod here, knew how to fly, was a pilot, knew a lot of connections in the aviation world, and we bought one airplane and started service between Provincetown and Boston in the fall of 1989. Our aspiration, our first tagline, Nick, was Cape Air flying for the Cape and Islands, because all we wanted to be was to fill a void that had been created by deregulation and those shock waves and provide air transportation primarily to Boston. So we started off with 3 flights a day. Our first brochure said up, and away, 3 flights a day. And it just took off and it grew. And surrounded by some really dynamic people, the airline over the years grew. So I don't think there was ever an epiphany moment.
Yes.
I think first we wanted to provide great service between Provincetown and Boston. And honestly, what happened was at the end of the first summer, the summer of 1990, we had 3 airplanes by that point and nowhere to put them because there's no demand between Provincetown and Boston in the winter. So we started our first southern market, which was Hyannis to Martha's Vineyard in 1991. And then we truly expanded to the south. We started routes in Florida in 1993. But it was very organic, and it was much more head down, like what can we do tomorrow, what can we do with the upcoming season to provide great service. It was never let's build a big business. And every now and then I'd look up and say, wow, we have 5 airplanes now, we have 9 airplanes, we have 15 airplanes. And over the years, Cape Air grew to a 105 airplane fleet, and we served in 5 different regions around the northern hemisphere, as far west as it's Micronesia out in the Western Pacific, and all over the Caribbean. Our second biggest region is down in the Caribbean. But I don't think there was ever that point where we said, wow, let's do this.
Yes.
It was really organic growth, and it was being very opportunistic.
That's great. That's good to hear. What was the process to go international? I mean, to the Caribbean and the Micronesia and the Pacific. Were there any difficulties with that?
A lot of paperwork. I mean, there really are challenges because you're dealing with. At one point, we were with several different foreign national countries because we serve the British Virgin Islands, Nevis, St. Kitts, around in the Caribbean. So you're dealing with very small nation states there. Out in Micronesia, you're actually dealing. Those are U.S. territories. So one is a territory and one is a U.S. Commonwealth. So we didn't have to do a lot of international work there, but it's a lot of paperwork. The thing is, when you have an ally in the foreign entity, they want your service, then it really helps because they streamline the process and they really walk you through it, as opposed to trying to force your way in somewhere where you're not wanted. So it was never a problem for us. We were always welcomed, and the process worked pretty well.
That's good to hear. Now, let's stick on to the difficulty part. Every company has a moment where things almost fall apart. Was there ever a point early on when Cape Air almost didn't make it?
Well, 9/12 of 2001. I mean, 9/11, operating an airline, and it almost brings me to tears because I know, Nick, you're an aspiring pilot, so you'll relate to this. For me, flying was always a thing of beauty. I mean, as well as a business opportunity, it's something I love to do, and the aesthetics of it. I always called myself a pilot poet. And to see the object of what I love so much to be used as a weapon or to be used for the mass destruction that 9/11 was emotionally a huge shock. But for Cape Air to get through that period and not only survive but thrive was the biggest challenge. Now, we survived as an airline several recessions. The biggest shock we had to get through was after 9/11, when from a regulatory standpoint they were looking at small carriers. And it was unclear to us whether we were even going to be able to continue to use the aircraft type because Cape Air has an open cockpit, and 9/11 was all about the terrorists seizing the cockpit. So it took several years to really recover from 9/11. There were some existential moments, but that was really the main one.
Wow. Well, that's very interesting. Give me 1 second. Dry mouth always gets me.
I hear you.
The aviation industry has changed a lot over the last few decades. What do you think are the biggest challenges regional airlines are facing today?
So, as Cape Air grew, I always called Cape Air a technology company that happens to fly airplanes.
Yes.
And the reason Cape Air has been successful is that we have embraced the commercial side of the technology advancement. And commercial is not just about selling tickets. It's about record keeping. It's about training. It's about really staying ahead of emerging technologies so that you can be successful as a company. And everything from the accounting department to the marketing department to the training and maintenance, the entire product really has changed in the time that we were in business. When we started Cape Air, high technology was something called a fax machine, which you've probably never seen, or if you have, you've seen it in a museum. And we had no computers. There were no spreadsheets. There were no word processors. Think about that. There was none of this. So as a business, we have had to adjust to all of the new emerging technologies, embrace them, use them. Now artificial intelligence, of course, is a huge opportunity and challenge in any industry, but certainly how it gets integrated into the airline industry is going to be the next big technology challenge. So the biggest changes have been around technology. Oddly enough, not around the technology of the aircraft itself. A lot of the technology that we're using to actually propel the airplane and fly the airplane have been there since the 50s, 60s, 70s, so pretty conventional. But the navigation systems, the engine monitoring systems, all of that has gone through, it was radio vacuum tube, again, a museum piece for you, through solid state technology, and now, of course, microchip technology. Yep. So, as things have evolved, any business has to be really dynamic. And one of the things I'm proudest about Cape Air is how we've embraced those changes and enhancements as they've evolved.
Do you think planes will ever go electric?
Yeah, well, so that's a great question. Cape Air was the first airline to sign an agreement for an all-electric airplane, which was being really on paper being designed in 2016. And the company that was doing it was an Israeli company called Aviation. And Cape Air had on order the first 75 all-electric airplanes to replace our fleet. It hasn't happened yet. And the reason it hasn't happened with electric aircraft is because the energy density of a battery is just not there yet. Mm-hmm. So if you take a pound of gasoline and the energy that contains and a pound of battery, it's so different.
Yeah, it's not equal.
Yeah, right. So the main thing you got to figure out with electric aviation is how you're going to carry the battery. An airplane is really designed around the energy source, gasoline, jet fuel, electric, battery, and the propulsion source. Is it a jet engine? Is it a reciprocating engine? Is it an electric motor that powers the airplane? And so there are a lot of white sheet designs out there. It's an emerging technology, and my hope is that Cape Air become the first to embrace that technology. And there's a reason why it makes sense for us to be the first, which is we fly relatively small airplanes, relatively short distances.
Yes.
And because of the energy density challenge, the first airplanes that are going to be all electric are going to be smaller airplanes, and the first stage lengths are going to be relatively short distances.
Yeah, I'd imagine range would be the biggest problem in that equation. So that's very interesting, though. First airline, that I would love to see that.
So you can go online. If you Google aviation, you'll see the airplane. It looks like a very futuristic design because, again, that airplane is really built around the batteries and around the electric motors. Yes. It's a beautiful airplane. The prototype actually flew several years ago. So if you go online and look, aviation, you can find the airplane. You can see the first flight. But they had financing problems in that company, and they never got to manufacturing and production. Mm-hmm. There are a couple other electric aircraft manufacturers, one out in California called Joby, one up in Burlington, Vermont called Beta. And both of those are designing airplanes that my hope is Cape Air start to use them in commercial service within the next, let's say, 5 years.
5 years?
Yep.
That would have been my next question when you see this going into electric.
I think, Nick, everybody assumed that, how microchips, they doubled in size every year.
Yeah.
And now we have terabytes or nothing. And back then a terabyte would have been a whole skyscraper to have that kind of information. Everybody assumed that battery density was going to do the same thing. If we have a battery that can produce X amount of energy per pound, that's just going to go on a geometric scale, and it really hasn't. We really need to rethink the energy source for an electric airplane, and it's got to be weight efficient, and we're just not quite there yet.
Mm. Well, that's great to hear. Let's see this. You've always kept Cape Air connected to Cape Cod. Why was it important to keep the company rooted here instead of moving it somewhere bigger?
The heart and soul of the company is here on the Cape.
It's in the name.
It's in the name. It was a group of local people who love this place, who have a passion for this place, and we were just so blessed and so privileged to be able to bring that together and catalyze it in a way that not only worked here on the Cape and resonated, but was a model that was scalable and transportable to other regions. So our second biggest region, other than the Cape and Islands and around New England, we're in all the New England states now, but the second biggest region by passengers carried and by revenue is the Caribbean. And we have a base in San Juan, which we started flying down there in 1998. And that's been a great region. So we built a business model that really was based on small community being served by, and it's very different than the major airline model. And I think a lot of other businesses on the Cape, even ones that have gone over the bridge and expanded nationally, have sort of tried to keep that Cape Cod parochialism because it works so well. So we developed a business model that is all about community service, whether it's here, whether it's in San Juan or the Virgin Islands or out in Micronesia. It's about building that service model around the community and then keeping that focus, whether it's the Cape. One of the things I loved most about the business is as we spread out, we had employees that would move all over our network. So you'd have a Chamorro employee from Micronesia end up going to New Hampshire, or you'd have somebody from Maine who had never been out of the state end up in a remote island in the Caribbean. And so it was really kind of fun to see our own environment and our own culture become bigger and more spread out and embrace and be more inclusive to different cultures all over the Northern Hemisphere. It's been just a great journey.
That's beautiful. That is great. Just focus on community. I see a lot of companies just like, oh, I just want to make money. That's the main goal, just make money, get a name out, get famous, but that's really beautiful.
You have to be profitable to stay in business.
True.
But the main focus, especially at a service business, which an airline is the people.
Yep.
So it's the employees and making sure that they are motivated and enjoying and having fun and feel empowered to participate in a successful venture. And then, of course, that reflects itself into the service you provide to the customers. So if you have a great people thing going on, and I know you've experienced it at the candy shop. I know what kind of business you guys are running there. If you're creating that kind of energy and people really feel like they're part of something important and exciting, that's contagious, and it works in the community and it works for your customers, and it just paves the way for success.
Okay, this one matters for me, this question. As someone who's hoping to build a career in aviation, I'm curious, what advice would you give young people who want to get into the industry today?
Follow your passion. When I learned to fly, you could get a private pilot's license for, you're going to choke when I say this, Nick, because I know you're looking at it and I know you're looking at the cost. My private license was less than $1,000. Yes. So you could rent the airplane for about $16 an hour, and the instructor was $8 an hour. So for $24 an hour, I was able to get my license. I bussed tables at a restaurant in Chatham, and by bussing tables, I could pay for my flight lessons.
Wow.
As you know, because you're embarking on this career, it's completely different now.
It is. It's changed a lot.
Just for a private license, you might be looking at tens of thousands of dollars just for the private. To get to the ability where you can be a commercial pilot, a flight instructor, and build time, you're looking at probably between $100,000 and $200,000 now.
Yeah, I've heard it's doubled in the past few years as well. So it's difficult.
But where there's a will, there's a way.
Exactly.
If you're passionate about it, you will get it done. There's a way. And looking across the table at you, myself having flown now for 50 years, I'm just excited for your passion for it and what I know your future is going to bring you.
Thank you very much. You've been both an entrepreneur and a public servant as a Massachusetts state senator. How did those two experiences shape the way you think about leadership?
Well, as I said before, it's all about people.
Yep.
And the same culture that I experienced at Cape Air, which is collaborative energy, people who are inspired and motivated and working together to accomplish a goal, that in theory is how a political system, a democracy should work.
Yep.
Whether you're a citizen whose participation is voting at the booth, whether you're running for Board of Select, or whether you're volunteering your time at a nonprofit, that energy about service to community is, to me, the same energy as forming a corporation. So Cape Air became an employee-owned company along the way because we wanted to share this success by sharing the ownership in the company, and that helped empower people and get them to be really engaged in the enterprise. I feel the same way about politics. I think you can only have a successful political system and community if people want to participate, if they're inspired to participate. It's one of the sad things about today is I think people feel powerless and shut out. And in a democracy or a successful corporation, people need to feel empowered and included.
Yep. That's true.
So to me, it was sort of an extension of that. The reason is I didn't think that through Cape Air I was able to participate in what some of the biggest challenges in our region are. Some of them environmental, some of them economic, some of them social. And one of the things I love about the blue economy, which is why we're here today,
Yep.
is that that's really focused on looking at a healthy society, a healthy community, as defined by businesses which can pay wages so that people can live lives of dignity and pride here on Cape Cod, raise a family, and have expectations that, as a society, we offer them up as the American dream, or I'd call it the Cape Cod dream. But for your generation, it has become more and more challenging.
It's been difficult. I look into the future. It looks a little scary, but we'll see as it goes on, right?
All I can tell you is that in 1968, when I was 11 years old, or in, let's say, 1975, when I was graduating from high school, it was really turbulent times. I mean, it was Vietnam War, the Civil Rights Movement. There were huge economic upheavals there, and all I can tell you is at that time it was scary too. So the fear that you're feeling and how your generation looks at overcoming challenges, it's not new. They're different challenges. And we in my generation, our legacy has to be to make sure that we are giving you a world that for those of your generation who want to work hard, who have a passion, who have a dream, also have an opportunity.
Yeah, and I'm hopeful. I am, truly. When you look ahead 20, 30 years, what do you think aviation will look like, especially just regional? Do you think everyone's going to switch to electric? Do you think it's going to be a little longer than 20 to 30 years?
So wearing my big picture hat, the environmental impact of aviation, I think as we get more and more conscious about how we need to treat the atmosphere or the environment relative to things like climate change, we have to embrace technologies that will reduce carbon.
Yep.
And that's in all modes of transportation. I mean, I drove an electric car here today.
Yes.
So the current administration notwithstanding, climate change is real. You can measure it with a ruler at our ocean front here on the Cape. You can see sea level rise. We experience sea level rise, the intensity of the storms like the one we just went through here on the Cape. So I think it's our responsibility to look for ways to decarbonize. So I think the next 20 or 30 years is going to be about reducing the footprint, the environmental impact that aviation is having while improving and increasing the service. The aviation infrastructure in this country is barely able to keep up with the business demands that are made on it. I'm talking about the air traffic control system, the airport system. So we need to make huge investments making sure that we're embracing modern technology. AI, for example, could make our air traffic system much more efficient. We could fly more airplanes, save fuel by flying shorter distances, and there are a lot of enhancements that we could see. So I think the air traffic control system is going to embrace technology changes as we go forward. I think the methods of propulsion are going to become cleaner, and I also think there are going to be some innovative, one of the emerging technologies is called eVTOL, electric vertical takeoff and landing, which are craft that don't need a long runway, that can take off vertically, fly you somewhere, and then land vertically. And I think you're going to see that technology emerge as well.
I'd imagine it costs a lot of money for that. Where do you think you'll find the money to pay for these new modern technology?
So there's two places. One is private investment. Are we going to see the investment community say, okay, there's a business opportunity here. If we invest in the medium and long term, we'll see that transition, and there'll be a lot of money for those who are visionary and invest. And then the role of the government. The government, just like with what's happening now, the government has to provide an infrastructure or make sure that there's an infrastructure so that those advancements can take place. So in that case, that's investing in airports. It's investing in charging technology. The electric grid is going to have to be really upgraded so that it can handle all of the demands to power those electric aircraft as we design them, also surface vehicles. So you're going to, government has a huge role and the investment community has a huge role.
True, it is. When you look back at everything you've built with Cape Air, is there anything you're specifically the most proud of?
Yeah, the part I'm most proud of is that people who came to the company, whether they were pilots or mechanics or airport service personnel or administrative people, I think came to the company with a desire and a vision to make a living, but to also be part of something bigger than they were. And one of the things that I'm most proud of Cape Air is the spirit and the culture of the company. And as I said before, that really reflects itself into the service that gets provided. So if you have a really healthy, dynamic, active, inclusive culture internally, the way we all get along as employees, that just translates almost organically to the customer and to the communities that you're serving in. And I know you've experienced that where you work too.
Yes, I have.
So that's just a lesson I wish more and more corporations, bigger corporations, would take seriously. Because you do see in bigger corporations, we could name a few here if you wanted to, but you see them looking at individual people as more or less economic units and not as human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason we're all in this together is to make a great place for human beings.
Yes.
So I never really understood that. It's part of the responsibility of building anything, whether it's a business or a nonprofit, is to create an environment where human beings feel like they're able to be fulfilled and actualized in the job that they're doing.
Exactly.
Not always perfect.
Yeah.
I will say there'll be some Cape Air employees who are listening to this saying, well, that wasn't my experience, but that has always been the goal at that company, and I'm very proud. I'm very proud of that.
If you could give one piece of advice to someone trying to start something meaningful in their community, what would it be?
Collaboration. If if you have a vision and a dream, even if it's something that can be successful, but you're not able to attract like-minded people, inspire them in a joint collaborative effort, you're not going anywhere. Nothing great gets done by an individual, even though we've become a society that sort of worships the Elon Musks or the Jeff Bezos or what's his name at Facebook. Even though we've become that society, the fact is the reason those organizations became big and strong and successful was because there were groups of people, all of whom shared a vision and shared a common goal and made it happen. So, the advice I have for somebody who has that vision is build a team, define what the role of that team is, empower the individuals in that team, and then be really collaborative. And the main lesson there, Nick, remember this: have fun doing it.
Have fun.
Your journey is going to be through the military. As you do that, you should find joy and enjoyment in what you're doing each and every day to the degree that you can. And that is infectious, and that will breed success.
One thing I feel like is the biggest problem is building the team. What do you look for in people when you're building a team and you're trying to create something meaningful?
I love that question. So any human relationship, whether it's a business relationship, whether it's a family relationship, whether it's a religious relationship, any relationship to be successful has to be based on a foundation of trust. So the first thing I look at is, do we trust each other? Is there genuine integrity and character in the room? Because without that, if you build any organization on a foundation that is not based on character and trust and integrity, it will not succeed. It will implode. If you have those strong basic fibers at the foundation, then even when you make mistakes, and everybody building any organization will make mistakes, you recover from them, you learn from them in an environment of honesty and truth, and then you go on and you repair from those mistakes. So it is about trusting the people that you're building the team with. It's about, the intelligence and integrity, all of that stuff. But it's got to be a shared common vision.
It does. Well, that's all I have for today. Thank you very much for coming out, and I appreciate you taking the time talking to us.
My pleasure. And all I can say, Nick, is you have a bright future.
Thank you.
Find joy, find satisfaction, find fulfillment in it, and let's talk in another 20 or 30 years. If I'm blessed to be around for that. Let's stay in touch.
Thank you.
Sure.